The high-tech solution, Florida is deploying robotic rabbits to help capture invasive Burmese pythons in the Everglades.
In the Florida Everglades, a silent war is being lost. But the solution wasn't a new poison or a bigger fence. It was an army of robotic rabbits. These aren't toys. They are high-tech decoys, complete with synthetic scents and thermal signatures designed to lure an apex predator from the shadows.
Scientists have deployed 120 robot rabbits. Yeah, they're designed to look, move, and even smell like real marsh rabbits.
The crazy part is, they worked. But what they exposed, what their cameras recorded in the dark, revealed a terrifying truth about the ecosystem that's far worse than anyone thought. The pythons were just the beginning of the problem. An ecosystem's vanishing act. At sunrise, the Florida Everglades looks like a dream reflected on water. Endless waves of sawgrass catching fire in the golden light. White herons standing motionless as if time itself has paused. But beneath that breathtaking beauty, something destructive has been unfolding for decades. The crazy part is, this isn't a natural disaster. It's an invasion. The Everglades, one of America's most fragile ecosystems, has been fighting a war it never chose, and one it's been losing in silence. The enemy isn't chemical waste or expanding suburbs. It breathes, it slithers, and it hunts without mercy. This is the story of the Burmese python.
Predator becomes prey in the Florida Everglades as hundreds of hunters descend on the Sunshine State to catch and kill as many Burmese pythons as possible.
What most people don't realize is that these snakes, native to the jungles of Southeast Asia, have claimed Florida's wetlands as their kingdom. How did one of the most biodiverse habitats in the world become a hunting ground for an invader that doesn't belong? The story began not in the wild, but in living rooms and pet shops. During the 1980s and 1990s, the exotic pet trade was booming. Baby pythons, shimmering with hypnotic patterns and gentle enough to curl around a wrist, were sold as novelties. People thought they were harmless, beautiful even. But beauty can grow into something monstrous. And get this. Within a few short years, those tiny snakes stretched up to 20 feet long. They became strong enough to overpower a deer, an alligator, even a family pet. When owners realized they could no longer control these giants, they did the unthinkable. They let them go. Some were released into nearby canals and swamps. Others simply vanished into backyards that bordered the wetlands. Then came 1992. Hurricane Andrew ripped through South Florida, shredding reptile breeding facilities and releasing countless more pythons into the wild. It was a perfect storm, one that turned a pet problem into an ecological nightmare.
All right, hard to believe, but Thursday will mark 25 years since Hurricane Andrew struck South Florida. Much of South Miami-Dade was flattened by the Category 5 monster.
For the pythons, the Everglades was paradise. It was warm, wet, and packed full of prey that had never learned to fear a silent constrictor. Rabbits, raccoons, birds, even deer. None stood a chance. With no natural predators to keep them in check and the ability to lay up to 100 eggs at a time, their numbers exploded. Biologists now believe tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands, slither through South Florida's wetlands. So here's the deal. What happens to a food chain when its balance is shattered by an apex predator that doesn't belong? The answer is already visible, and it's devastating. In the heart of the Everglades, silence has taken over where life once thrived. In regions now ruled by pythons, the familiar sounds of rustling raccoons, the quick steps of rabbits, and the quiet crawl of opossums have all but vanished. Studies have shown a terrifying decline. Populations of raccoons and opossums have dropped by over 99%. Marsh rabbits? They're gone. Even larger animals like deer and bobcats have become victims. One massive python was found with a full-grown deer inside its stomach. In another chilling encounter, a python and an alligator locked in a desperate struggle. Neither survived. This isn't just about animals vanishing, it's about an entire system collapsing in slow motion. When small mammals disappear, predators like hawks and owls lose their food source. When scavengers perish, the land stops cleaning itself. The Everglades, once a finely tuned machine of life, has started to grind and crack under the weight of an invader it was never built to withstand. But the scale of the problem was so vast, officials turned to a bizarre, desperate solution: a public spectacle. The futility of force. When officials finally grasped how unstoppable the python invasion had become, panic gave way to creativity. Or perhaps desperation. Faced with a threat too vast for science alone, Florida tried something audacious. They turned the crisis into a contest. Cash rewards, public fame, and the thrill of the chase. A challenge that mixed fear with fascination. In 2013, the state announced what would become a spectacle unlike anything before: the Python Challenge. It was an open invitation to anyone daring enough to step into the swamp and face the serpents head-on. The plan sounded bold, maybe even heroic. With basic training, a few safety tips, and a bounty for each captured snake, hundreds of citizens were set loose into the wilderness.
South Florida has hired 25 top hunters to capture and kill the snakes. A nearly 17-foot-long python was killed last week.
On paper, it looked like a victory waiting to happen, but reality had other plans. More than 1,600 people answered the call, traveling from across the nation with airboats, machetes, and headlamps cutting through the Everglades darkness. The wetlands buzzed with energy. TV crews followed. News anchors broadcast live, and the entire scene began to feel more like a reality show than an ecological rescue. For weeks, the swamp roared with the hum of engines and the echo of shouts as hunters scanned the grass for a shimmer of movement. It was thrilling to watch, but the outcome stunned everyone. When the event ended, the total catch stood at only 68 snakes. 68 out of an estimated tens of thousands. The number was so small it barely registered. The pythons had won that round without even trying. Still, quitting wasn't an option. The challenge became an annual ritual. Bigger prizes, better training, flashier promotion. But for all the noise, for all the hype, the math never changed. The Everglades was still losing. By 2017, officials began to accept the truth. The seasonal competitions were doing little more than generating publicity. A new approach was needed. So, the South Florida Water Management District launched the Python Elimination Program. This wasn't a game anymore. It was a profession. Hunters were now paid by the hour, trained, licensed, and given bonuses based on the size of their captures. The bigger the snake, the higher the reward. This was grueling, hazardous work. Some hunters went hours without seeing a single snake. Others found themselves face-to-face with creatures longer than their boats. And the financial strain was impossible to ignore. Millions of dollars were being poured into the effort. Payments to contractors, maintenance for equipment, endless fuel for boats patrolling more than 1.5 million acres of swampland. Yet the returns kept shrinking. For a while it seemed to be working. The number of captured pythons rose. But then the reports came in. The overall population hadn't dropped at all. It was as if every python removed was instantly replaced by 2 more.
100 eggs at a time. And they have no natural predators in the Florida Everglades.
Officials tried everything modern technology could offer. They even experimented with so-called Judas snakes, pythons fitted with radio transmitters released to betray their own kind by leading hunters to breeding sites. But the swamp's vastness swallowed signals. By the end of the 2010s, the truth could no longer be avoided. The fight was too big for people alone. Humans were outmatched. So they turned to humanity's oldest partner, the dog. The nose knows. When the bounty programs failed to make a dent, wildlife managers came to a sobering realization. They didn't need more hunters. They needed different ones. Eyes and traps had failed. Drones could scan, but not sense. What if the solution wasn't technology at all, but instinct? That's when Florida turned to man's best friend. In 2020, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission launched a small, audacious experiment. 2 dogs would be sent into the wild heart of the Everglades to hunt not by sight or sound, but by scent.
Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's detector dogs were in the field today, demonstrating their expertise at finding the invasive snakes.
Their names soon became legend: Truman and Eleanor. Truman, a black Labrador, and Eleanor, a Dutch Shepherd, were trained for months. They learned to detect a smell so faint that even the sharpest human senses would miss it. the musky, earthy trail left by a Burmese python. Their training was relentless. Trainers hid snakes in metal crates beneath piles of wet reeds, even under half-submerged logs. Each time, Truman and Eleanor found them. When the day came for real deployment, they moved through the swamp on long leads, their handlers trailing behind with GPS trackers. The results came almost immediately. In just their first month on the job, Truman and Eleanor helped locate several massive snakes that had evaded human crews for weeks. The scene became almost ritual. Truman's tail would stiffen. Eleanor would begin to circle, her nose pressed low to the earth. Then she'd stop cold. A moment later, a flashlight beam would slice through the dark, glinting off the slow, muscular ripple of scales. What teams of biologists had spent hours searching for, the dogs could uncover in minutes. It was a revelation. Word of the canine duo spread quickly. For the first time in years, there was a sense of hope. But in the swamps, every victory comes with a price. The Everglades is as brutal as it is beautiful. Scorching heat, suffocating humidity, and peril in every direction. The sawgrass can slice like knives, and the murky waters hide alligators and cottonmouth snakes. Protecting Truman and Eleanor became a full-time mission. The dogs were fitted with cooling vests and special boots. Yet nothing could change the fact that every search brought them closer to the very predators they were trained to find. Despite the brutal conditions, the dog teams accomplished something extraordinary. They uncovered a pattern. Each time Truman and Eleanor followed a scent trail, it didn't just lead to one python. It often led to something far more significant. A nest hidden beneath reeds, a cluster of eggs buried in mud, or another snake coiled nearby. Piece by piece, the dogs were revealing the blueprint of an invasion. Scientists began plotting these discoveries on detailed maps. Slowly, a network emerged, a living map of how the pythons were spreading and breeding. The dogs weren't just finding snakes, they were exposing the system that sustained them.
A slightly different approach to finding pythons in that they're not visually searching for pythons. They're actually trained really to search using their smell.
But even with that success, one truth remained. Truman and Eleanor, as brilliant as they were, could never cover a wilderness that spanned 1.5 million acres. The method worked, yes, but only in fragments. The dogs proved scent was the key, and that led scientists to a dark, controversial new idea. When science went too far. Desperation pushes science into strange, uncharted territory. After years of failed hunts and the realization that even detector dogs could never keep up, Florida's biologists found themselves staring at an uncomfortable truth. To outsmart the pythons, they had to think like one. And what does a python crave above all else? The answer was a memory of what once filled the Everglades. Rabbits. Specifically, the marsh rabbit, once abundant, now almost gone. If the pythons had wiped them out, could the ghost of that craving be used against them? It was a dangerous question. The very idea of using live animals as bait sparked outrage. Yet for some researchers, it wasn't cruelty. It was strategy. The Burmese python is an ambush predator guided not by sight but by scent and heat. If they could safely replicate what the snakes were hunting for, perhaps they could finally draw them out of hiding. So, in a series of small, controlled experiments, teams built reinforced pens. These enclosures were strong enough to keep the rabbits safe, but open enough for their scent and body heat to drift into the air. Each cage became a silent signal in the night. Then, something remarkable happened. Within weeks, the motion sensors began to trigger. Pythons started to appear, one after another, gliding through the reeds straight toward the pens. At a single test site, over 20 snakes were lured in within just a few months. The rabbits, trembling but unharmed behind the mesh, had done the impossible. They had become living beacons, and in doing so, they revealed a secret. The pythons were far more numerous and far more organized than anyone had ever imagined. The results were undeniable. Wherever the scent of rabbits lingered, pythons gathered.
It's helping to remove Burmese pythons from the wild in record numbers.
But victory came with a price. The footage of trembling rabbits trapped in their pens, surrounded by the silent circling shapes of pythons, ignited a firestorm. Animal welfare groups condemned the trials as cruel. Even some scientists within the project began to question the ethics of their own experiment. Could the rescue of one species justify the fear of another? The debate grew louder. Critics argued that no creature, no matter how invasive, should be fought through the terror of another. Under mounting scrutiny, officials had no choice. Funding was withdrawn. The live bait program was shut down. The principle was proven, but the method was toxic. The answer wasn't life, it was technology. In the ashes of that controversy lay the spark of something extraordinary. The principle had been proven. It wasn't the living rabbit that mattered, but the biological signals it emitted: heat, scent, the faintest rhythm of movement. If those cues could be recreated artificially, the hunt could continue without cruelty. A new alliance was born. Engineers joined hands with biologists, blending cold precision with the instinct of the wild. Together, they began to design something the Everglades had never seen before: the robotic rabbit.
These solar-powered robo-bunnies move, emit heat, and soon they'll even smell like a real rabbit. All to fool Burmese pythons into thinking dinner's been served.
So, has humanity's high-tech fix just proven that it's already too late for the Everglades? Let us know your thoughts below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories you won't find anywhere else.